Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark, where we constantly remind you that love is greater than fear and happiness is resistance. Good evening. This is your host of the Age of Fission radio show, Lonnie Clark, and we're back at it this week reading The New Nuclear Danger by Dr. Helen Caldicott. We left off at page 151 on a new subtitle. We're almost through this book. I am not going to read the appendix. There's quite a long, it's about a third of the book actually. Helen Caldicott gives extensive references. Let's just put it to you this way. Any of her books are well referenced. So about a quarter of the book is just references, appendixes and references. So we're on page 151. The book actually ends at 187. So we're almost there. And I want to thank everyone for joining my radio show and welcome you to 2019. I'm very much looking forward to a happy new year. I think it's going to be a much better year in terms of our growth and our ability to face the facts, because I think we've already kind of come through the hump of, you know, what I call that Scooby-Doo moment where you go, like, say what? Like, really? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first learned about this stuff 5 or 6 years ago, right after Fukushima in 2012 is when I found out about it all. I'm like, wow. And now I've come to the point where I realize we are not going to be contaminated. We are contaminated. We show signs of heavy metal poisoning all the time. That's one of the things that cleaning up your diet will do, is actually get rid of the heavy metal detoxing. Take turmeric, have a lot of ginger, do things that detox your body and detox. You can look it up. Just look up heavy metal detoxing and don't do anything severe because then you make yourself sick. But you can ease into it if you're not used to it, and you can go severe if you're used to it. How about that? But there's things we can do. Like people have common headaches. You get tumors, cancers, all these stuffs. It's just heavy metal detoxing. I recommend drcircus.com, SIRCUS.com. He talks about a simple remedy of a half a teaspoon of baking soda every morning, and it draws out the toxins in your body, and it's a great detox. And you should not do too much. I interviewed him. You can look for him on YouTube, on UCY TV. You can just type in UCY TV. That's the channel it'll be posted on, because I did not post all of my interviews that I did on UCY.TV. She posted to her YouTube channel. I did not in turn take the time and post it to my YouTube channel. So it's only on UCY TV, but there are great interviews. And Dr. Circus was one of my last interviews. It was only a half an hour. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just post up these old interviews here on the radio show. I'll go through them. Because there is a lot of great information, just like Libby Halevi's show. I helped Libby get her show on the air here. We take off her bit of self-promotion because we're a nonprofit, so you can't have shows on that say, give us money. That's illegal. So anyways, we still want her information on the air, right? So I edit all that out and we post it up. NuclearHotSeat.com. I honestly recommend that channel. And HanfordChallenge.org, for those of you in the Northwest that don't know about where to look here. There is a lot going on. I found a story that I posted to my YouTube channel just yesterday, which was, January 2nd, that the contractors in Hanford just got posted a $152 million contract for a 7-year period for medical, to help out with the medical stuff. And it's very interesting. It's almost as if we pay people to tell our employees when they get sick that no, nuclear isn't affecting you and there's a limit to what we're going to pay for you, and sorry, you're getting sick and you're about to die. That's what it feels like we're doing. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm cynical, but they've had this contract, they said, for the 6 years, and we have seen what's happened up in Hanford, where the workers actually just have to fight for safety gear, much less their medical expenses getting paid. It's pathetic, the way we betray. That's the thing that I don't dig about the nuclear industry. Because it's still part of the Manhattan Project, there's a deep level of betrayal against American values. And that's kind of my objection to this book. That's why I'm reading this book, The New Nuclear Danger. Because It's all about war, but it's a betrayal to the American values. Our values are not about war. Our values are about coming together and joining as one. Not we're going to keep everything secret from you, take all your tax dollars, put them into these programs, and oh, by the way, in 2020, we're going to start targeting certain individuals and forcing everybody into compliance because we have lasers up here and we can target you if we want to. That is not going to happen. That has already happened. So, and it's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's super ridiculous that people are ignoring the vision for 2020. It has been laid out by the U.S. military since 1985. That's what this book is about, and that's what Carl Grossman, the other book that I read here, Weapons in Space, it's about. Vision for 2020. Look it up, folks, and read it because it's real, and they have perfected it. So my question is, this whole thing with Trump breaking up the establishment military, what's up with that? Who's he installing? Because now he got in there and he's like, holy crap, what do we got here? What can I make some money on? And that's what he's doing, man. For real. Not that they all weren't. It's all for profit. Prisons for profit, healthcare for profit, war for profit, profit, money over people. That is the motto. And this is where we've gotten wrong. This is at least in IMO, as they say, in my opinion. We have really gotten off track as a nation. Ethically, in terms of integrity and morally, because of the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project needs to end. We need to stop the secrecy, the secret government, the duplicity, the doubleness. If we have these secret agencies looking out for us, the people, so this is where the whole thing about, what was that case that gave corporations equality? Well, it was based on what? The Third Amendment. Right? Section 3, Article 3, I guess, where corporations have equal status with states and the federal government. So the next step was, well, if they're above citizens, they at least have the equality of citizens, right? But then when you start handing out these $152 million contracts to private corporations that are healthcare corporations, to government workers who are being poisoned, who are literally, wink, wink, being paid to not pay for the full medical benefits, because if they paid for them, then their families could likely sue them for exposing their family members to such toxicity. And then when their grandchildren come up with a third arm, or an arm that's incomplete, or an eye that's closed, that's a common thing, like the baby's born with an eye thing where the eye is just closed. It needs an operation. You can open the eye, the baby sees fine, bada bada bing. That is what's called a mild birth defect that is, quote, acceptable by the International Atomic Energy Agency and every military on this planet, in fact. It is beyond comprehension, the level of inhumanity that we have endured because of nuclear contamination. I am not an anti-nuker. I am a nuke truther. And I refuse to call myself anti-anything because I think we haven't really been able to use nuclear the way it was intended, the way we're supposed to use it. We're not supposed to use nuclear for war, for killing, for wasting, for targeting our planet and destroying people. Oh, great, we'll just poison people and clear the planet of all this disgusting, filthy people. And then we'll have it all to ourselves, and then we'll remediate it because we have the secrets and we know how to do it, so we're just going to wait and kill people. That's not how it works. Because the earth doesn't work like that. I mean, the earth is far, far greater than all of our knowledge. And that is the fact. And it is going to change itself. We are an intrinsic part of it all. And this is why I think it's important, if we feel this urge to, face these things and face it with, I don't want to face it with anger and bitterness or fear. I want to face it all with love, because guess what? It's our new reality. I want to love my life. I appreciate living. I am grateful to be alive. I am glad for 2019. 2018 was a year for me of shedding things that didn't work and understanding things in a different way. The only way we can move forward is with love and not with battery, punching each other in the face with facts about, oh my God, 4,000 millisieverts, 5,000 millisieverts. You know, if it's that contaminated, everybody's going to be sick. You know you're sick. Otherwise, we're all contaminated. What do we have here? 12, 13, probably 20, 30 in Corvallis, 35, 40, 50 up in Kennewick, 45 is average. There's places on this planet, like all over Russia, that is super high. And when the rain comes down, they don't measure. Like, it comes down in the rain, the snow, it's in the grass, it's everywhere, folks. And it's not just nuclear. And the thing is, we don't have to fear it. We can face it and figure out how we're going to fix it. But this new nuclear war stuff, we do have to face so that we can stop it and redirect it. Because they are moving full steam ahead. So I'm going to get to reading. We're 10 minutes out into the show, I can see. So we're on page 151. We are in, I think it's the 7th or 8th chapter. Let me see. Yes, it's the 8th chapter. And the 8th chapter is titled Nuclear War in the Gulf and Kosovo. And the new subtitle is Medical Implications of Uranium Weapon Use in the Gulf War. During Operation Desert Storm, America M1, A1, M1, and M60 tanks fired 14,000 depleted uranium anti-tank shells. 7,000 rounds were used during training during Desert Storm, fired into sand berms in Saudi Arabia. 4,000 were fired during combat, and 3,000 were lost in fires and other accidents. And now it's worse than that because they changed the Army manual to sell depleted uraniums, and the U.S. Army declared them regular weapons viable for use in normal sales. They did that in 2009. So this was written in 2002. So she's shocked by this, but now it's so far worse. This is why nobody can live in Gaza, frankly. So that's 20,000 depleted uranium weapons they did over in the Middle East. And let's see what else. The Air Force A-10 tank killer planes also fired approximately, 940,000 30-millimeter depleted uranium rounds in combat, totaling 564,000 pounds of depleted uranium that either hit their targets or were scattered over the desert floor. For those that hit their targets, it is important to know that uranium-238 is pyrophoric. When it hits a tank at high speed, it bursts into flames. Up to 70% of the shell is vaporized and converted to tiny particles of oxidized uranium-238. 60% of the particles are tiny, less than 5 microns in diameter. Because these particles are light, they can be transported many miles on wind currents, and they are small enough to be inhaled into the terminal bronchi, the tiniest air passages of the lung. They can reside in these terminal bronchi for many years, irradiating a small volume of surrounding cells with high doses of radiation. The larger particles can be wafted up to the throat, carried by the mucus and cilial action of the airways, and then swallowed. 1/3, or 564, of the 2,054 air tanks used during Desert Storm were equipped with uranium armor plating, providing them with a tactical advantage because the conventional Iraqi weapons would have no chance of penetrating them. But by their use, the American tank crews were exposed to whole-body gamma radiation, similar to the X-rays emanating from the uranium armor. At the end of the operation, between 300 and 800 tons of uranium-238, with a half-life of 4.5 billion years, lay across the battlefield of Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. never to be retrieved, in spent rounds, in solid and powdered form, in various states of decay and dispersal. Wow, that is a crime against humanity. Wow, who could make that decision? I'm flabbergasted. External dose. I wonder what they did. What's that town in Iraq that they just plastered with depleted uranium? I'll think of it in a minute. Moving on, new subtitle. External dose. External gamma radiation emitted from uranium shells can be as high as 200 milliamps per hour, more than the yearly dose received from the natural background radiation. One DU penetrator found at the port of Daman in Saudi Arabia measured 260 to 270 millirads per hour. If, for example, a person picked up a shell and kept it in her pocket for 10 hours, she would absorb 2.7 rads of gamma radiation, a relatively high dose. Children have been found playing with the empty shells, and people collect shell fragments to display in their houses. Soldiers took home the radioactive ammunition as souvenirs, unaware that it was dangerous. Internal dose. The water supplies in the affected areas are at risk. The dissolved uranium will concentrate in the food chain, thousands of times at each step, particularly in milk, including human breast milk. As noted, it is not possible to taste, smell, or see radiation. Children and babies are 10 to 20 times more sensitive to carcinogenic effects of radiation than adults. The geographical areas in the Gulf that are now contaminated with uranium will remain radioactive for the rest of time, the inhabitants being at risk for cancers and congenital deformities forevermore. Insoluble, tiny ceramic particles of uranium dioxide aerosol will be inhaled into the lungs of the surrounding population, be they soldiers, adult civilians, or children. And the radioactive water will cause pollution of the food supply. Because the uranium, its daughter isotopes, and the contaminants named above both emit alpha and beta particles, the lung cells with which they are in contact will absorb high doses of radiation. It takes a single beta or alpha particle or gamma ray to damage a single regulatory gene in a single cell to kill the patient. Like a parasite, cancer uses up the nutrients of the body and the patient wastes away and then dies. Insoluble uranium is also transported from the lungs by macrophages, macrophages, white blood cells that ingest soluble or foreign bodies, to the lymph glands in the center of the thorax. The cells in the glands receive a radiation dose 10 times that of the lung cells. The complications of irradiated lymph tissue are leukemia and lymphoma. Indeed, some of the NATO troops who were exposed to uranium weapons in Bosnia and Kosovo are now reporting an increase in leukemia, as are the civilians in Iraq. Uranium is solubilized in the lymph glands and transported to the liver, where it can cause liver cancer, and to the bone, where it can induce bone cancer or leukemia. The biological half-life of uranium-238 in the bone is 300 days. This element can also be deposited in the brain, the kidney, the muscle, the spleen, and most important, in the reproductive organs. In 1997, uranium-238 was found in the semen of 5 out of 22 American veterans who had been carrying uranium fragments in their bodies since 1991. Wow. This finding is significant because there have been reports of an increased incidence of congenital abnormalities in the offspring of veterans and also in the newborn babies in Iraq. The uranium is finding its way into the testicles, where it is mutating genes in the sperm cells. Uranium can also induce testicular cancer. Uranium crosses the placenta, where, like a drug, formaldehyde. It can induce severe fetal abnormalities by killing cells that are imperative to normal fetal development. This is called teratogenesis. Uranium is also a heavy metal. As such, it can cause a particular form of nephritis or kidney disease. It is excreted through the kidney, so this organ is at particular risk. It is known that many Gulf War veterans are also suffering from kidney disease. The kidney is also at risk because the heavy metal uranium is also radioactive. As the kidney is the main organ of excretion for the uranium that is stored in the body, there is a risk of renal carcinoma. No epidemiological studies have been done by the Pentagon to determine the true incidence of renal disease among the veterans, nor have there been any studies to determine whether malignancies have increased. And this was written in 2002, but I know that Dr. Chris Busby did do studies of Fallujah, of the families in Fallujah and the veterans from Fallujah and the veterans from Iraq and Fallujah and the children. And it is determined, they did do those studies, and it is definitive, and they were able to win in court. I mean, it is definitive now. Moving on. The Pentagon is also steadfastly refusing to conduct studies of the civilians living in the contaminated area. What is their prognosis or life expectancy? What will happen to future generations? Instead, the Pentagon and the British Ministry of Defense are blocking efforts to study their troops for relevant diseases. Wow, really? The Pentagon and the British Ministry of Defense are blocking efforts to study their troops for relevant diseases, disclaiming any association of the so-called Gulf War syndrome with uranium ammunition, even though a secret report issued by the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority in April 1991, a month after the conclusion of Desert Storm, warned that only 40 tons of uranium debris left from the DU weapons could cause over 500,000 deaths. Actual debris amounts was not 40 tons, but about 300 to 800 tons. Oh my gosh. And actually that's part of what Chris Busby studied, was this. Because they did resist it, but he pushed through, and he actually got through some of this. Aware that the radioactive dangers, Saudi Arabia demanded that the U.S. Army collect all the tanks, vehicles, and instruments of war destroyed by uranium munitions on their territory. Because Saudi Arabia is a close ally, American ally, the request was honored, and the contaminated equipment was taken back to the U.S. to be stored with extreme care. To this end, the Pentagon has constructed a high-priced, high-security, high-tech cocoon at the Savannah River Nuclear Facility in Georgia to process radioactive materials from the contaminated equipment. This building, Building 101, has special walls and flooring to prevent air or dust from escaping to the outside world. Kuwait and Iraq have not been so lucky. There is no U.S. commitment to decontaminate their radioactive land. New subtitle: Prior Knowledge. It is clear that the Pentagon understood the medical hazards of uranium munitions well before Desert Storm. Numerous reports from the military acknowledge that uranium-238 can cause kidney damage, cancers of the lung and bone, non-malignant lung disease, skin disorders, neurocognitive disorders, chromosomal damage, and birth defects. In July 1990, an Army contractor warned, aerosol DU exposures to soldiers on the battlefield could be significant, with potential radiological and toxicological effects. Under combat conditions, the MEIs, the most exposed individuals, are probably the grounded troops that re-enter a battlefield following the exchange of armor-piercing munitions either on foot or motorized transport. However, no warnings about the dangers of uranium were given to the American or coalition forces deployed during Desert Storm, let alone to the surrounding civilian populations. Finally, in their only statement of responsibility, the Department of Defense admitted in January 1998. Our investigations into potential health hazards of depleted uranium point to serious deficiencies in what our troops understood about the health effects DU posed on the battlefield. Combat troops or those carrying out support functions generally did not know that DU contaminated equipment, such as enemy vehicles struck by DU rounds, required special handling. The failure to properly disseminate information to troops at all levels may have resulted in thousands of unnecessary exposures. The military cover-up was partially explained in a statement made by Lieutenant Colonel M.V. Zeman of Los Alamos Lab in 1991. There has been and continues to be a concern regarding the impact of DU on the environment. Therefore, if no one makes a case for the effectiveness of DU on the battlefield, DU rounds may become politically unacceptable and thus be deleted from the arsenal. I believe we should keep this sensitive issue in mind when after-action reports are written. Because of the cover-up, support personnel were not told to check soldiers for uranium-contaminated shrapnel wounds. Wow! Nor were they told to wear protective units during their own contact with contaminated soldiers, equipment, or soil. Wow! In direct violation of the Operative Army and Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulations, there was no medical testing or follow-up of the soldiers who were either wounded by uranium or may have inhaled or ingested uranium dust. Wow. The symptoms of this is what I mean. The lawlessness, the lying, the cheating has got to stop. The Manhattan Project secrecy has got to end. This is just too much. That is un-American and that is illegal. The symptoms of Gulf War syndrome are difficult to correlate with a specific disease entity. Nevertheless, complaints of the veterans are surprisingly similar in pattern to various pathologies induced by uranium exposure as described by the U.S. military. Without definitive medical and epidemiological studies, it is at this stage impossible to know exactly what the future holds for the people exposed to uranium from the weapons used in the Gulf and the Balkans. Estimates must suffice. The president of the American Gulf War Veterans estimates that 50,000 to 80,000 veterans are afflicted with Gulf War syndrome. 39,000 have already been dismissed from active service, and 2,400 to 5,000 have died. In Britain, about 4,000 returned servicemen have Gulf War syndrome, and 160 have died. What were the causes of death? Why the cover-up? Collation of the diagnosis would make plain the link between pathology and uranium. If there is nothing to hide, why not publish the data? And the intrigue continues. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has steadfastly resisted conducting studies on the health effects of exposure to uranium-238 following Desert Storm, Bosnia, and Kosovo. The reason for this refusal is an agreement forged in 1959 between the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which actively promotes nuclear power worldwide, and the WHO, the World Health Organization, stating that if one agency wishes to carry out a study that affects the work of the other, mutual agreement is required. The IAEA has never agreed to such studies. However, even Dr. Michael Rapaccioli, who's coordinator for occupational and environmental health, acknowledged that young children face particular risk from depleted uranium. Young children could receive greater depleted uranium exposure when playing within a conflict zone because of hand-to-mouth activity that could result in a high depleted uranium ingestion from contaminated soil. Medical reports from Iraq indicate that childhood malignancies have increased to 7 times what they were, and the increase of congenital malformations have doubled in the areas where the bombing was the most intense. International sanctions have worsened this medical situation. Pediatric physicians are unable to treat these patients because they have no access to chemotherapeutic agents, no antibiotics, and no radiotherapy. New subtitle, Clean Up. Back in the U.S., the concern about uranium has been so great that large contaminated areas of soil were dredged, containerized, and removed during the cleanup of uranium-238 contamination of the Star Met plant in Concord, Massachusetts, at Sandia National Labs, and Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where DU penetrators had been test fired. I guess they are perpetrators, aren't they? The Army knows that it should have cleaned up its radioactive battlefield. In a report in July 1990, it warned, assuming U.S. regulatory standards and health physics practices are followed, it is likely that some form of remediable action will be required in the DU post-combat environment. However, once the scale and cost of the cleanup was realized, the U.S. Army Environmental Policy Institute informed U.S. policymakers that, quote, no international law, treaty, regulation, or customs requires the United States to remediate the Persian Gulf War battlefields, unquote. As Dan Fahey of Military Toxic Projects said, the United States has established a precedent during the Gulf War which permits an armed force to use depleted uranium weapons without warning civilian populations about contamination of the land. Wow, that should be illegal. I just can't believe that anybody actually does that. But they are doing it. And that's our reality, folks. Bada bada bing. Woo! And it's actually ongoing. This book was written in 2002. They've gotten way better at it. They are definitely selling way more depleted uranium weapons. In these days, it was illegal to sell depleted uranium weapons. Now, it's quite legal. We're selling them to Saudi Arabia. What do you think they're dropping in Yemen? What do you think the Israelis are dropping in Gaza? Depleted uranium weapons, guarantee. Page 157, new subtitle. Proliferation of uranium weapons. Here we go. I guess she's thinking the way I was thinking. I love Helen Caldicott. Thank you, Dr. Caldicott. You've been so awesome. The U.S. has either encouraged the construction of uranium weapons in or exported uranium munitions to 16 other countries, including Australia, Britain, France, Greece, Turkey, Russia, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Egypt, Thailand, Taiwan, Pakistan, Japan, and New Zealand. Other sources say that Iraq itself, Oman, Jordan, Abu Dhabi, and the United Arab Emirates may also have these weapons in their arsenals. The UN Subcommission on Human Rights has condemned uranium munitions as weapons of indiscriminate destruction. As such, they fail the temporal test. Their effects continue after the war ends. The environmental test, they pollute food, water, and soil. The humanness test, they have effects beyond those necessary to achieve military objectives. And the geographical test, the particles can potentially travel to non-combatant countries. And the manufacture and testing of uranium weapons affects civilians, even if the weapons are not used. The Navy has been testing their uranium munitions on a training range in Vieques, Puerto Rico. They admitted to firing 263 uranium bullets, of which they recovered only 57. You may be sure these figures are underestimates. The people in Vieques blame the Navy for higher than normal cancer rates in the area. The Navy denies that their activities have damaged anyone's health. Britain has been firing uranium munitions in various locations, including Exmouth, Cumbria, Solway Firth, and Lillworth in Dorset. They were also test-fired in Germany at Lower Saxony in the early 70s and in the upper Bavarian town of Schrobenhausen, where they were tested for 17 years until 1996. And they were used by the U.S. in combat in Mogadishu in the early 90s, when a warning was issued to medics that they might encounter soldiers, quote, who had unusually high levels of contact with depleted uranium, unquote. Israel almost certainly has been using uranium armor-plated tanks and uranium weapons against the Palestinians on the West Bank and in Gaza. New subtitle, Bosnia and Kosovo. 2 other radioactive wars have been fought in recent times, primarily by the United States and its NATO allies in Bosnia and Kosovo. As of this writing, an international furor is erupting as soldiers and peacekeepers deployed in Kosovo are developing malignancies, including leukemia. Approximately 31,000 rounds of uranium ammunition were fired in Operation Allied Force and 78-day war in Kosovo in 1999. And over 10,800 uranium shells were fired in Bosnia in 1994 through 95, mainly around the city of Sarajevo, where the American A-10 Warthog planes fired uranium munitions from its 30mm Gatling guns at the rate of 3,900 rounds per minute. Initially, NATO officials were reluctant to give their member countries specific information about the use of uranium ammunition in Kosovo or Bosnia, although in July 1999, NATO had warned those countries with armies and aid workers in the Balkans that there could possibly be, quote, possible toxic threat, unquote, arising from the use of uranium weapons, and advised them to take preventative measures. The head of the UN Environmental Program criticized NATO for not being more forthcoming about where it had used the ammunition. Concerns about depleted weapons began percolating among the NATO countries in December 2000, when Italy announced an investigation into 36 soldiers who had served in Bosnia in 1994-95 and in Kosovo in 1999. 12 have cancer, and 5 to 7 have died of leukemia. About 30,000 to 40,000 Italian soldiers served in the Balkans, and the Italian Defense Minister, Sergio Mattarella, said, "I must express my bitterness that the competent international organizations have waited until now to answer our request for information that is important to the Bosnian community and the members of the military." Spain will test all 32,000 of its soldiers stationed in the Balkans since 1992. 2 confirmed cases of leukemia have been reported among the Spanish contingent. Apart from the leukemia deaths, an unknown number of soldiers who served as peacekeepers in the Balkans have an array of symptoms similar to Gulf War syndrome, including hair loss and chronic fatigue. Other countries concerned about the future health of their men include Kosovo, Denmark, France, Belgium, Portugal, and Holland. Ireland, Latvia, and Romania will also test their troops. 5 Belgian soldiers have malignancies, and 2 Portuguese, 2 Finnish, and 2 Dutch soldiers. Portugal will send scientists to measure radiation levels in the affected area. Russia will send a team to check the zones where its people are deployed as international peacekeepers, and plans to test all military personnel before January 20th, 2002. Portugal and Italy have also accused NATO of a cover-up. A former environment minister from Finland, Pekka Haavisto, who headed the UN inquiry into Kosovo, said after an inspection of the Kosovo battlefields, quote, "We found some radiation in the middle of the villages where children were playing. We were surprised to find this a year and a half later after the war. People had collected ammunition shards as souvenirs, and there were cows grazing in contaminated areas, which means the contaminated dust can get into the milk." Haavisto, that's unquote. Haavisto and his team discovered low-level beta radiation at 8 of the 11 sites they sampled. They recommended that the contaminated areas be marked and fenced off because, he said, the local people do not understand the material. The 11 sites examined were chosen from 112 areas of the NATO that NATO admitted it had targeted with radioactive munitions. Wow. 11 sites examined were chosen from 112 areas that NATO admitted it had targeted with radioactive munitions. Although, to Haavisto's anger, NATO procrastinated, taking almost a year and a half before providing the necessary geographical data to the UN team. Haavisto also expressed concern that the use of controlled explosions to clear mines, unexploded munitions, and cluster bombs would scatter the radiation and toxic materials again. After several weeks of European consternation and banner headlines in December 2000 and January 2001, NATO, which to a large degree is controlled by the U.S., was finally forced under a full investigation into the possible effects of depleted uranium. Apart from NATO, the 15-member European Union ordered its own inquiry. After months of steadfast denial about the dangers, the British Ministry of Defence has asked for an independent study on the possible effects of uranium weapons. The House of Commons met in January 10, 2001 to decide whether to summon ministers to explain the government's policy. Britain finally agreed that, along with the other NATO nations, it would conduct tests on its troops, 1,400 of whom are said to be suffering of the Gulf War syndrome. 469 of these have died. Causes of death have yet to be made public. No doubt medical tests will benefit families and soldiers, but the doctors will be unable to ascertain whether or not these people have actually inhaled or ingested uranium particles. Blood tests will reveal only whether or not the patient has leukemia at the time of testing. X-ray scans of the body will determine where there is an advanced cancer. Urine tests will reveal if the person is excreting uranium. If positive, the patient is at risk for developing a malignancy years later. Even if the urine shows no trace of uranium, it does not mean that the uranium is not deposited in bone or some other organ. There is no way to determine whether or not there is uranium in the body, apart from placing the patient in a whole-body scanner where a tiny specific spectrum of radiation can be detected, indicating the presence of uranium or its decay products. If the whole-body scanner fails to detect traces of radioactivity, this still does not exclude damage. Uranium could have been in the body previously, mutated some regulatory genes, and then be excreted. The patient could still go on to develop cancer. Medically, one would not expect the symptoms of leukemia to arise for 2 to 10 years following the exposure. So the troops who were present at Operation Desert Storm and in the 1994-95 operation in Bosnia may well be developing leukemia, but it is early for soldiers exposed in 1999 to be manifesting malignancies. The incubation period for cancer may be shorter than we have been led to believe when exposed to internal uranium deposits. We have much yet to learn. Dr. Eric Wright, a British radiobiologist, said, "I am not aware of any real radiobiological research in depleted uranium." Wow. That the soldiers and peacekeepers will be followed medically is appropriate, but there are tens of thousands or indeed millions of innocent civilians at risk in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Bosnia, and Kosovo, as well as other places around the globe where radioactive weapons have been aerolized by testing. These people must be followed up and cared for. On January 17, 2001, The Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Spiez also discovered traces of uranium-236 in the weapons used in Kosovo. As uranium-236 is made with fission, I skipped a line. As uranium-236 is made only in a nuclear reactor, these weapons are definitely contaminated with fission and transuranic products from nuclear fission. The U.S. military and Department of Energy must have known about this contamination. If there is uranium-236, almost certainly there will be plutonium, together with americium, neptunium, strontium-90, and cesium-137. The situation has extremely serious medical implications for the public health of the people who have been and will be contaminated. Wow. That is a serious indictment. I don't know about you, but that is a serious indictment. We are at the end of chapter 8, folks, and I'm going to end there because I see we're just at 45 minutes in. And I want to talk to my audience about, I guess, getting active. It is extremely imperative that we contact and make comments on the NRC website. You can go to Hanford Challenge. I usually have links. You can go to the NRC website and just put for comment, public comment. There's drop-down menus and look there. It's very important that you contact your senators. All the senators are pro-nuclear. This is the weird part. They're all pro-nuclear. They all say, like here in Oregon, they passed a law that says we're not supposed to have nuclear in our state. So they all vote. They say no, no, no. But all of our senators here vote for nuclear. So it's important for us to keep poking them and not let them get away with doing what they want to do, which is basically walk away from nuclear waste at every nuclear site in the country. They don't have answers for nuclear waste. There's no way to make money from nuclear waste except for war. They're making weapons. But they're not paying for the nuclear waste sitting, like right now, out on the shores of California at the San Onofre nuclear power plant that was successfully shut down because it was about to break. They closed it down, and now what they're doing is moving the waste 100 feet closer to the shore. Who would do that? This is like intentional genocide. It blows me away, the level of disregard for life on this planet. I mean, what did this book just say? NATO literally stopped them from studying the soldiers who were exposed. They held their feet and did not give them information and tell them where they actually blew up these depleted uranium weapons for over a year and a half. Who would do that? What kind of inhumanity is that? They know the dangers that it causes. It's not an option. Our soldiers are exposed to it. Our own soldiers are knowingly exposed to it. So if we want that to change, we have got to stand up and say, no, we cannot have this. We need oversight of our military. We need to stop the secret government. We need to shut down I think we need to shut down the Manhattan Project. I mean, I think it's completely outrageous. But look, hey, I'm going to end here. I think we're 10 minutes left in the show. I want to stick on Dave Parrish's Fuku Friday that he posted last week. I hope you guys are enjoying Dave Parrish's little Fuku Friday things. I love them. I think it's totally fabulous. Please follow Dave Parrish on YouTube, DaveParrish, Dave Parrish. And he does Fuku Friday every Fridays, and I'm sticking them on here. Put your courage feet on, you guys. We'll be back next week. Welcome to 2019. I'm super looking forward to it. Talk to you later.
8 minutes to tell you the top 4 stories of the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2018. It's not a lot of time for a lot of info, but I'm going to try it anyways because it's so important. Hey y'all, it's Dave here from Operation Save the Earth, and this is the Fuku Friday Happy Hour Hangout for December 28th, 2018. 2018 is the breakout year I predicted it would be, and that certainly was the case for Fukushima news. Now, without any further ado, here are the top 4 stories about Fukushima in 2018. Coming in at number 1, hey, guess what? They found the fuel finally. That's right, back in February of 2018, they finally found some of the melted fuel in reactor 2. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, because for the past 7 years, we've not found any of the fuel. It all got either expelled into the atmosphere or into the Pacific Ocean to, quadrillions of becquerels, something like that. And we don't really know what happened with the fuel that melted down through reactors 1, 2, and 3 there at Fukushima Daiichi. But like I said, this year we finally found some of it. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is it's going to take decades to clean that up, and it's going to take robots that haven't been built yet. So, baby steps, right? So we'll take that for our number 1 story for sure. What came in at number 2, guess what? The cover-up, that thing that's been in place this whole time, everyone's saying, oh, you're crazy, Dave, because, everything's fine at Fukushima. Yeah, right, that's because that's what the cover-up says, all right? The cover-up this year started to melt. Hey, guess what? For years and years and years, we've been talking about it. Mainstream media has got it wrong when it comes to Fukushima. 94% of the time, we have a study that shows that, right? But in 2018, things started to change. Newsweek, MSNBC, 60 Minutes, Netflix's Dark Tourist Show, they all featured episodes that highlighted the problems at Fukushima and weren't talking about, hey, oh, don't worry about it, everything's fine, go ahead and eat the fish tacos. This is the first time in years that's been the case, and we're starting to see this cover-up slowly start to melt away. Eventually, everyone on the planet is going to have global consciousness about what's going on at Fukushima without all this, obfuscation that's been going on. Yay, yay, yay for that. That's a big breakthrough for us. Coming in at number 3 this year, hey, guess what? Yes, Fukushima radiation really can kill. Ever since the Fukushima nuclear disaster started, again, mainstream media has been saying, oh, well, no one's died because of the radiation, so don't worry about it. Well, really, because, everyone in the Fuku fighter crew knows that actually dozens of workers have died from radiation exposure and other ailments that they got from working at the plant at Fukushima Daiichi since 2011. Okay, this is a reality. Anybody who says that isn't the case has not done their research. I defy anyone at this point to say, hey, no one's died because of Fukushima radiation, and then look at Masao Yoshida, the former plant operator who died of esophageal cancer in 2015. Look at the 7 sailors who've already died from Operation Tamagotchi. And look at, what just came out in the Japan Times this year. TEPCO-linked firm employees' thyroid cancer caused by work at Fukushima Daiichi. Okay? And then Taiwan News also put out an article later this year. You'll be able to read those articles right here in the description of this video below, saying that, hey, guess what? Somebody keeled over and died working over at Fukushima Daiichi. Believe me, that happens a lot more than people talk about, okay? So, again, if you are still on the bandwagon that says no one's died because of Fukushima radiation, you're wrong, okay? You are wrong, and you should stop saying it because it's very, very hurtful, okay? It's very disrespectful to those who've already passed, okay? You're the wrong ones. And coming in at number 4, this one's been percolating all year long. TEPCO executives are tried in court for negligence over the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And right now, the big push there in Japan in the courts is to push for jail terms for these guys. Hello? Can we get a little bit of justice for what happened there? Yeah, I think we can, especially considering the fact that in court, TEPCO's own employees showed that, hey, guess what? We showed you executives twice that a tsunami, of this height could really do a lot of damage to the Fukushima Daiichi. And these jokers, these former TEPCO executives, keep saying to this day, we didn't know about any of these reports, even though we were handed to them personally. Come on, man. Really? Hey, if it means, old men, you guys are going to jail for, all the wrongs that took place at Fukushima Daiichi, believe me, that's just a start. That's just a start. And we've had all kinds of successes in the courts in Japan, not here in the States, but in Japan, for people who've, suffered from this unbelievable catastrophe. So things are heading in the right direction. These 4 items should at least give you that kind of idea, right, Fuku fighters? All the hard work, all the suffering that we've had to endure throughout this entire period in a post-Fukushima world has been worth it. Because like I said, 2018, these are breakthrough news items that, believe me, you would not heard anything about in 2012, 2013, 2014, okay? Let's keep pushing Fuku fighters about the truth, and let's keep putting our content out there. How do you get started doing that if you haven't already? Hey guys, here's an idea. Go over to OperationSaveTheEarth.com. Take step one for yourself. Get started on your journey to a nuclear-free world, because it's going to take all of us to be able to accomplish that, right? And once you're ready to get your hands a little bit more dirty, guess what? All you got to do is send me an email at info@OperationSaveTheEarth.com, and I will put you on our free weekly mailing list where you get every Monday morning a list of the 4 biggest news items about Fukushima of the week. It's a super quick digest of Fukushima news that you can share with your friends and family very easily off of our blogger. All right, so check that out. Also, don't forget to follow us at OSTE 8 Minutes, all spelled out, on Twitter. That's where you'll get the latest Fukushima news of the week, guaranteed. Now, as we wrap things up here in 2018, let's look ahead to next year, when even more big moves and changes are set to take place. Trust me, you won't want to miss any of it. So stay tuned, stay involved, and stay true to life and each other. Until next time and next year, this is Dave saying peace and good fortune to everyone.
The Age of Fission radio show brings you book readings, pertinent articles, interviews with both activists and victims of nuclear and environmental contamination. We strive to deliver only the facts from reliable sources. We want to remind you that love is greater than fear, and happiness is resistance. Our dedication to love and happiness paves the road for innovation and healing. As we face our harsh reality, let us hold each other up and rejoice in our humanity. If you want to comment, please send your thoughts to ageoffission@gmail.com. That's AGEOFFISSION @gmail.com. To your host, Lonnie Clark.